Hello, everyone, and welcome to a Building Smart webinar. This webinar is part of the Building Smart Virtual Summit for Spring 2022. Thank you for joining. My name is Jeffrey Ouellette. I'll be your moderator today, as well as one of the presenters. I'm here with Greg Schleusner, and I think we're going to have Dennis Shelden joining us soon. So today's webinar, TR4, is moving forward. We're really going to be having just sort of a loose discussion about our plans to carry out the new technical room mission of determining what we're doing for the next generation of IFC. The webinar is scheduled to last about an hour. We're not in a position to really open up the mics to everybody, but we're hoping everybody can interact with us through the comments over there on the right-hand side. Please enter your comments, ask questions as we move forward. The webinar is being recorded, should be available within 24 hours on the website in the replay section of the event. Before I hand it over to Greg, I'd like to remind you that your lines are muted. So again, use the comment section. There's Dennis. And I would also like to bring to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for their adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct, which can be followed with the QR code or can be found on the buildingSMART website. So with that, I think,
I can start, and then Dennis can add in whatever you feel. So thanks everybody for joining today. Like Jeff said, this is really us just trying to get a little bit of feedback and communicate how we sort of at least the thoughts we've had thus far on how to move this project forward. So remember, the context of this was in the technical room. We historically have a steering committee, which we'll still have, but we think a externally facing project that's more dynamic, that showcases and continues to collect work from people doing interesting things, is probably the way that which we need to engage this particular topic. And as was really trying to be stressed in the Monday session, we really sort of want to start with functional requirements, and that continued even into yesterday when we had technical discussions, because the goal there was to really focus on sort of why technical choices were made versus just trying to argue the merits of the technical choices. It's nuanced, but this is sort of the discussion we want to have. So what Jeff has on his screen is on the left or the right side of what you're seeing is basically the things we already have in place. On the sort of goals side, we don't need, I have a slide that shows similar things. We don't need to talk about this, but I think, we think the mechanics are, we need to sort of gather these functional requirements, investigate other schemas and exchange methods. And I think the assumption is we do this as part of a monthly sort of meeting process that we try to engage people as closely as possible. And that's roughly where we're starting from. Dennis, any take on that?
Yeah, I mean, not really. This is going to be a hard conversation if it's just the three of us. And I guess the technology still gets in the way a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I think at some level, first of all, the existing IFC does what it does well. But I think the sessions this week and also, just what we've seen in past summits, there's a lot of exchanges going on that, both take advantage of the core information that BIM and IFC are trying to convey and surround that, right? But there's a huge and growing value in building data, not just for exchange of BIM models among generators and consumers of that data, but across a whole spectrum of use cases. So I think where you started, Greg, is what should buildingSMART take on of that huge spectrum? What do we want to where do we want buildingSMART and its technical efforts to assert themselves in that spectrum of use cases, right? So before we and I think that there is some convergence in the technical community around what those exchanges entail, right? Clearly, there's a move from, although it's not, an incomplete. There is, let's say, an enhancement of web services and online systems and data exchanges through APIs, in addition to file-based mechanisms. And clearly there are sort of database scenarios in addition to sort of what do you want to call them, sort of authoring tools, right? And I think there's some convergence, as I said, in the web technical community writ large around what those mechanisms are. But before we get there, let's figure out what the use cases are and where buildingSMART wants to play. And I think that's the focus of this year, is to look out into the various communities that we interface with, see what's happening, and understand, and maybe document what the use cases are, and then make decisions about what buildingSMART strategically wants to do to support that, right? And essentially, I think also to be in the middle of that conversation.
Yeah, and that particular point, I mean, I'm not at privilege to say. I mean, you saw the work. If you were on the call yesterday, you saw the work that's being done with iModel. That's getting more and more open source all the time. But there are similar efforts. I'll just call them, say it that way, to look at data standards that perform a sort of single aggregation role within a lot of the companies. I'm being vague because it's sort of these are things that are not public. But the point there is to bring that up, is saying there's a real opportunity to sort of centralize the conversation, not in a way that says we own it, but to really, even for the course of these meetings, really expose those discussions across big companies to smaller efforts, and smaller efforts to big companies. Because this is one of the sort of things from I'll just say from a technologist end user standpoint, you don't often get to see these sort of, oh, I'm working on this big gnarly problem, let's talk about it a little bit in public. So I think I'm actually excited just for even if we come out with a sort of hard set of requirements that is hard to meet, I think the act of going through and communicating with the different groups of people will be valuable in and of itself.
Jeff, can I ask, is there a way to find out who's on this meeting?
No.
Not even Jeff?
I have to dig around in the back end in a different thing here.
Do we know if anybody's on?
Well, we had 50 people yesterday and we had no comments, so we figured that like that's a good ratio. So if you get over 50, we'll get one comment. But please do feel free to comment. Outside of continue this discussion, what I have done is put together this dumbest simple little form, a Google poll or a Google form. So if you do have interest, I'll drop it in the chat, and you can just fill it out and say you want to be part of the future meetings, as a simple way to get some feedback from this group, just to put you on a list to say when we get the meetings in place and start to schedule these, that we know who to reach out to.
Yeah, go ahead and throw that up there.
Yeah, so let me just grab that quickly. And it's like the most rudimentary version of just who you are and do you have a particular interest or description. But and of course, I'm struggling to find the link. There we go. But yeah, I think we could belabor. Oh, wait,
okay, well, let's try it at least. So there's a private chat. Okay.
Jeff, I'm finding I can't enter a comment myself.
What? So if you go up to comments and you look down at the very bottom, you're not able to do it?
It's like the dialogue's missing.
Maybe your Windows got you cut off?
Hopin says the organizer has cleared the chat.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That's fine.
There was no.
Yeah, I don't have an
So at the bottom, there should be a little post a comment.
I have no. Yeah, no
frowny face
window.
there. Frowny face there is not. Not for me either. I guess for everybody besides
right.
the.
Can you private chat to me?
Yeah. Maybe that's why we didn't get any comments, because the comments box is not rendering or something.
That'll do it. But Hopin and Han Lee can do it. Oh, but Hopin did it 5 o'clock yesterday.
But Hopin is
Hopin is the
platform.
StreamYard and Hopin.
So Han Lu can do this.
Interesting. Well, okay.
Yep. Background sound. Yep. Cool.
Apparently, I'm using. What am I using? Firefox. So maybe that's the issue.
Works best on Chromium-based browsers.
I don't have it.
Yeah. Well, nonetheless, unless I suppose if you want to provide feedback in the comments, we just wanted to make sure we're communicating what our next steps are, and like the purpose of the forum was just to collect interest in taking part of these meetings as we get them spun up. Any other particular feedback? Now I'm saying that I have one thing. The one thing that I know we need to do is sort of collect all the things that we've done in the previous sessions under one place. Probably starting with the forum, but also maybe on a GitHub repository wiki or something like that, that just gives you all the why we had all these people speak at the last summit, like Speckle and Bomb and these sort of things. So it sort of gives the context. That's the thing I think we need to do in the meantime, but then the next step would just be publish it or starting to schedule those meetings.
Where do you guys want to publish the collection of all this stuff? Do we want to do it on the technical website or just within the forums or what?
Where's the simplest and the easiest?
My instinct is actually just to use a GitHub wiki. So it's all all the artifacts end up on GitHub anyway, but we can have the, I don't know. This is probably the wrong place to decide this, I suppose. But
if you can comment, I guess if you can't comment, you can't comment. But first of all, are there any questions about the direction? Does it even make sense? I think as was stated, the ambition is to start developing to move forward ultimately to the development of, this is a loaded term, but a version 5 of IFC, right? Does this direction but the first thing we want to do before we start developing technical evolutions of the IFC standard is to figure out the use cases and to aggregate the use cases. First of all, does that make sense or not make sense as an approach? And second, more interestingly, we're interested in getting from the community particular use cases that may not be effectively handled with the current IFC 4, and maybe secondarily technologies that are doing interesting related things that either we want to interface with or we want to see as a precedent for that work. Does anybody have any examples of either relevant software or relevant use cases that we should take into consideration? That's a request for comments, either private or comments.
No, just in comments. They don't have a private chat.
Yep. To give a little answer in case people are having trouble coming up with things, a couple of things that we hoped we could get on this call, but scheduling wise and contact wise we didn't, is thinking about how would an IFC representation work within a cesium context. That's a perfect example of one we'd want to have on the group. The web is quickly moving towards liking GLTF, what's a pretty straightforward like IFC plus GLTF use case look like, because we're seeing a lot of those sort of examples show up. What is IFC's role in those sort of things, and why? It's two examples of things we'll probably want to schedule in the first couple meetings. I have a feeling there is some limitation on the comments, because I would assume we'll get more than two. But this is just an extremely boring topic. I personally don't think so, but there you go. Jeff is highlighting that. I will just check, see if I can quickly find that to see if I'm getting responses already, and if that's the case, maybe we're getting more. We're getting responses in lieu of getting chat.
Does anybody know if anything with the Microsoft DTDL effort has moved forward at all?
It has been 6 or 9 months since I checked in. Yeah, but I think it is. Yeah, I mean, I know Microsoft is committed to it. I don't think they have a ton of partners working with it, but they have, I think it's in the dozens. We could always perhaps get them back. It's certainly an interesting technology, right? And and nota bene, it uses JSON LD, I believe, as the transport mechanism for the object model. I was just recently trying to teach Autodesk Forge to some students, and I think it's an interesting example of when models are translated, there's essentially a geometry component, which is, I want to say SWF, and then what do they call it, a manifest, which contains the structure of essentially the metadata structure, right? So that basic, how can I say, the basic architecture of geometry, sort of topology and data, I think is something that we'll see. Again, I don't want to jump to technical conclusions, but it's something that we'll see, I think, in many use cases, right? If we can convey the geometry in whatever format, in whatever form, meshes or otherwise, we can convey the organization of the model, and we can convey the metadata. That's a pretty consistent thing that we should be looking at. I think we'll see that in various approaches.
Yeah, and that particular one, if you follow along one of the guests we've had previously, which is the IFC.js team, they've been, if you follow along in their Discord forum, they're trying to work on a sort of GLTF plus parsed IFC, and we've talked previously about the sort of notion that work Dennis and others have worked on, which is an IC JSON representation. It would be handy if that became the de facto, or was evolved to whatever that wants to look like as the de facto JSON representation to link to those pieces of geometry. So I was going to follow up with Dennis on this one, so we might as well just talk through. But like that's a good opportunity to link those projects. And Dennis has certainly suggested this before, but I didn't realize they were going down that path until just recently. So that's another very typical pattern of separating the two is there something of value of separating them in a way that adjacent representation is also a standard? That's really what that asks.
What was Bureau Happold's? That's the bomb model, right?
Yeah, bomb. Yeah, which
Yeah.
I'm also trying to teach students this week, and it's more complicated than I thought it was. It's anyway.
Yeah, it's data as code is the way I think about it. Which I should have said that because that just makes me ignorant because I can't say anything what I actually mean by that. But yeah.
What are some other ones I can list here on my notes and follow up with materials? There's HyPar.
Yeah, and HyPar isn't their primary goal is not solving this, but they have solved or implemented a thing called elements that starts to introduce both a classification or a element system, and then also there's a sort of nascent effort around the geometry kernel associated with it, it's an interesting one. It didn't come up in the discussion yesterday. One of the ways I model is potentially pretty powerful for Bentley's use case is that it standardized the geometry creation in the format versus externally to the format. So that's a very similar thread. Obviously, we've had Speckle on. Trying to think. I'm blanking on other initiatives that are trying to do this in an open way.
Well, like IFC OpenShell.
Yeah, I just make the distinction that they're not trying to invent but work with.
Mm-hmm.
Although that said, Thomas has done work with HDF5, which is Thomas Crinan, sort of an interesting place. You don't see HDF5 in any place other than like the scientific world typically, but it's this big. It's really good at random access from like a file-like structure, but then works with a Hadoop and these other technologies. In lieu of anything else, I'm happy to call it a day. Ask people to follow up and enter the form, and we go from there.
Yeah, and I mean, you can always contact us. Send me an email through the technical email address, or just up on the forums. I think we can start something in terms of, well, we have a technical room forum category, so that's one thing we can start this discussion in. Just create a new topic and just say, hey, what's next gen IFC 5 look like, or next gen IFC look like? And we could also establish even a subcategory, like an activity for it.
Yep.
In fact, there is one already. In the developers section, it has a few things, but didn't really get very deep.
Yep.
And it was pretty technical.
Okay. Anything else, Dennis?
No, I think we should close. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
Jeff, thanks for coordinating all week. Appreciate it.
No problems.
Thanks everybody that's attended and listening, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in the immediate future.
Yep, and we'll send out a notice of when we're going to hold these meetings online, and then we'll record them and get everything posted and let everybody know where that happens. Alrighty, thanks everyone.
Thanks all.
Hope you all had a good summit.